All right, today we're going to be going over Monza in Singapore. Monza is kind of a bit of a historic race, and it's known for several different things, especially after last year. A lot of people had a kind of a very negative, semi-mixed experience, and we're here to kind of break that down and hopefully share some knowledge with some people who've been there, mostly been there a couple of times, and it could definitely help share the info, help set some expectations, and just get a general idea of what's going on. And then we're also going to be touching on the Singapore Grand Prix, which is it's been around for a while. It's still a fairly new circuit, especially compared to Monza. But that one is definitely on the other side of the spectrum as far as organization goes for a Grand Prix weekend. It has a totally different vibe, but it seems like the only similarity is that you get some Formula One cars on track. And so today we're joined by Greg from Vanet.
Hey everyone. So I've been through Milan. I have not been to Monza, but I've been to Singapore. So that's my gift for today.
And as usual, we got Andy from F1 Destinations.
Hi everyone. I've been to Monza 4 times, 2 of which were for the Italian Grand Prix. And I've been to the last 4 editions of the Singapore Grand Prix.
We've also got April.
Hi, I'm April. I'm US, based in Phoenix. Went to Monza last year with the very messy experience. So happy to share that.
And we've also got Eduardo joining us today.
Hello. I've been to Monza for the Grand Prix only one time, but I live in Milan. So I go fairly frequently to the circuit, either for the 6 hours in the WEC or in any other event that is in there. I am usually there, so happy to share anything I know about moving around in Italy.
Sweet, that sounds awesome. Okay, so today let's get right into Monza. And this race is, I think it's the oldest circuit that's on the Formula One calendar. It's I think from like the 1920s is when it was built.
100 years old last year. They had the centenary.
So the original layout was on the old banking, and that eventually got modified because mostly for safety and just time. But the original banking is still there. Am I right, Andrew, that you can still explore some of it?
You can. Pretty much the entire northern and southern sections of the banking are still there. And last time I visited the circuit in May, it was a non-race day, and the northern half was open. It's probably worth noting that if you go to the Italian Grand Prix, it will be off limits on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'm not sure about Thursday, potentially, and Monday. I think there's a good chance you can visit the banking.
It seems like they kind of, just like most Grand Prix, they have a lot of areas closed off leading up to the event, just for organizational kind of coordination and for logistics to get people and things in and out of the area. And so I haven't actually been to Monza. I've been in and out of Milan a couple times, going out to MotoGP. So I'm somewhat familiar with the area, but Monza's been on my list of races to go to, but I am hesitant, and it sounds it's going to be a good experience, but you just need to set your expectations for what it is. It's on the cheaper side also of ticket prices and things or places to stay. It's kind of the lower end of the budget categories, where you can get a general admission ticket for 110 euros for a 3-day, but they're so cheap, it gets very crowded and the views are limited. It's a flat circuit, and so if you're not right up against the barrier, it can really restrict your views and your overall enjoyment, because being Italy, it can be a bit chaotic with crowds and lines, and just it seems a bit more of a veteran experience type of event, where you kind of have to know what to expect, where to go, and how the event is going to take place. And that's where I've got Eduardo, who's local to Milan, and we're hoping to kind of touch on some of the transport options. And so I think the best way to get to Milan is if you're in Europe, there's train options or there's flights. You got three major airports. You got Malpensa, Linate, and Bergamo, and all three are pretty well connected throughout Europe. I've flown into Milan and then out of Linate, so there's definitely options on trying to find what works for you with the times. Where it seems like they're all kind of served by multiple carriers. It's not specifically KLM.
I would just chime in there and say Bergamo is best for cheap flights. It's a big Ryanair hub. So like for low cost carriers in Europe. Linate is more for regular airlines, but only within Europe. And Malpensa is kind of the main international, or, you know, with a lot, it's got the most connections, including, you know, to USA, other parts of the world.
Yeah, and just adding to that, as far as connections to Milan, because Bergamo and Malpensa are a bit away from the city, all of them you can take a bus that takes you right to the center of Milan, to the central train station of Milan. In the case of on Linate, you can even get there by subway, because it was open exactly this year. So this is going to be the first year that you can actually get to Linate just with the subway. So all three airports are super well connected to the city of Milan.
I think there's also a train from Malpensa to the central.
Yes, and there's an express available as well, which we're lucky enough to get.
Yeah, April, where did you fly when you flew into Milan?
We connected through New York at JFK and then went into Milan. And then took the express into the city center and stayed in the city center.
Yeah. Okay. When I flew from New York there for the Imola race this year, it was the same, like New York to Milan, but it was a direct. It was really easy. Flights are actually really affordable, especially relative to a flight to Rome. And then that train, I booked it in advance, and you couldn't change the time, at least on the ticket that I bought. But if you can buy it in advance, and it was pretty cheap.
Yeah, and I mean, the advice that I give to everyone that gets to Malpensa is the train leaves every 15 minutes, literally. There are two main train stations that they get in the center of Milan, Cadorna and Centrale. The ticket cost, I think, 13 euros, something like that, 13 euros. And you can buy it, pay contactless right before you board the train. So super convenient, super easy, and super fast to get to the city.
So to pay, is it just like a Apple Pay or, you know, Google Pay, whatever's on your phone? You don't need to have a special app or anything?
No. You can use any contactless payment method that you have on your phone, or you can also use, I mean, if you want to pay with cash because you have cash, or you want to pay with another card, there's always vending machines that you can also use to buy the ticket. So any option of those you can use, and it's super convenient, honestly.
Yeah, and that I use that the vending machines that were right in the station, just paid with a credit card and hopped on.
Sounds incredibly easy.
It is, yeah, honestly. I mean, compared to the rest of the experience of the Monza GP, getting to Milan, it's actually convenient and easy.
Okay, so let's talk about once you're in Milan, where am I going to stay? What's the best places to stay? Is camping an option, or do we want to stay at hotels in certain areas? Because I know staying in Monza can be pretty difficult because a lot of the accommodations either get booked by teams and staff, or they just have the regulars where it's more of a locals only thing, and it's pretty difficult to stay there. So it seems like the most viable option and easy is probably to get some accommodations in Milan. But what are the best areas or best options to stay at? Where have you guys stayed?
Where I stayed, we actually were in Italy for a couple of weeks and bookended in Milan. So started there, ended there, stayed in a hotel right next to Central Station. And then actually did an Airbnb the weekend of the race. And again, it was right there next to the train station. Interestingly enough, we decided to take the train out of Porta Garibaldi to get up to Monza. And that line seemed to be a little less chaotic. But we were really right up the street from the Central.
And how long does it take to get to Monza from Central?
I didn't take that route. So.
Yeah. I guess, what was the other route that you took?
Out of Porto Garibaldi, so just a slight bit, I think, southwest or west of the Centrale. And that was about, well, under normal circumstances, I think it's about 30 minutes, but because of the crowds, it was a bit longer. I think it took us about an hour.
Yeah,
by train.
which in the grand scheme, it's not too bad compared to some of the circuits.
And I guess
that was to Monza station.
That was actually to the one that is near Gate D, so the far north east side of the track. And give me one moment, and I can pull up the name of it exactly. Yes.
Díaz Lesmo.
Yes.
Yeah. I
So
also
it's worth
took that
noting
one on Sunday.
that there are express trains to that station on Sunday only. There's a lot more trains on Sunday. I think it only takes 20 minutes from central Milan. But if you want to go to that station, you can go Friday and Saturday as well. There's just less frequent trains and they stop along the way. But also it depends where you're sitting at the circuit, because that's kind of in the, I'm not sure if I'm looking at the circuit. It's in the northeast corner of Monza.
Yeah.
So it's good if you're going general admission around Lesmo or Ascari as well, or grandstands 9 or 10. But for most of the rest of the grandstands, it's a long walk. So you're better off going to Monza Station.
And so if, what are the, is it easy to find a hotel, or is it something where it's mostly local brands that are bookable compared to, say, the most popular things like Hilton, Marriott, things like that? Is it easy to find a place, or for Airbnb also? I'm just trying to get an idea.
Yeah, my experience was relatively easy to find a place. I mean, I did look through quite a lot and did a bit of research and things. The hotel that I stayed at originally was a local brand. It wasn't a big chain brand. And we did that more for the cost of it. Was a lot cheaper than a Hyatt or a Hilton or what have you. And then the Airbnb cost was actually relatively low as well from what I was expecting.
Yeah, I've stayed at some Airbnbs in Italy, and they're surprisingly cheap, and everything's worked out for me. I know it can be hit or miss, and it seems like it's more common in North America for hosts to cancel and raise the price and book on a different platform. And I feel like it's less common in Europe, or at least in my experience. I'm usually pretty upfront about it and just let them know, hey, I'm here for the Grand Prix. And, do you have any, I usually ask a kind of an open-ended question of like, what's the best way to get to the circuit, or things like that. And I feel like it helps kind of engage a little bit, and it can, I don't know, I feel like it might be more inviting than just, I don't know, just being another booking.
Milan is a big city. It's, I think, either the second or third biggest city in Italy. It's a modern city by Italian standards. So you have everything from cheaper hostels and Airbnbs to like international brands of hotels where you can stay. So if you book with time, there's definitely an option for every budget that you can find in the city. And the city is also super well connected. So I would say, if you don't find anything close to Centrale or close to Porto Garibaldi, you can search anything that is close to a metro, a subway station, and you can get to Centrale in 10 minutes, 15 minutes at most. So the city is very well connected with the public transportation. So it's definitely an option to stay not really close. I mean, obviously it's ideal, but if you have to stay somewhere else, it's also fine. The city is really easy to navigate, honestly.
Awesome. One other suggestion. The first time I went to the Italian Grand Prix in 2014, I stayed in a northern suburb of Milan, which is kind of halfway between downtown and Monza, called Sesto San Giovanni. Yeah, there's a train station there, a metro station, and it's actually also a bus, the Z221 bus, which goes direct from that station to Monza, to the circuit, in fact, which is also another good option.
You can actually see it's like right below the 15-minute mark
Yep.
on that train.
And Eduardo, is there any areas that you would avoid staying at? Is it because for me, the way I like to travel is I like to be close to more local restaurants, and I
Okay.
mean, it's just something I like to stay more in a residential area, and not something that's super touristic. Like say, I haven't been to the Duomo, but I don't know if it's more tourist heavy in that area compared to being somewhere else in like a more residential neighborhood that's available through an Airbnb. What do you recommend?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you want to stay like right, really close to the downtown, almost everything in the downtown of Milan is very touristic. So anything that is close to Duomo, to the Castello, which are the main attractions of Milan. One neighborhood that I really like, but it's really touristic, it's called Brera. Super nice, a bit more on the expensive side, but again, it's very touristic. If you want to kind of like party, if you like that kind of like vibe of like nightlife and stuff like that, you can go to the south of the city, to a neighborhood that is called Navili, and that's where every bar is in Milan in there. So if you want nightlife, you can go there, search for something in Navili, which is again if you want to party. If you want something that it's a bit calmer, yeah, you just don't stay near downtown. The only area that I maybe would avoid is an area that it's called Villa Pizzone, which is towards the north. That area is a bit sketchy, so I wouldn't stay there. But apart from that, honestly, everything that is close in that highlight in the image area, it's pretty nice. It's easily connected. The area around San Siro is also somewhere that it's calm if if there is no game, obviously. If there's a game, it's like staying in Monza. But yeah, I think those are nice areas to stay.
And what about safety wise? Like, is it dangerous at night, or is it somewhere where there's usually plenty of people walking around? Do I need
Yeah,
to?
Milan in an overall sense is a safe city. The main thing that you have to worry about, which is this a general issue, I think, in Italy, is pickpockets. I don't know if it's been trending lately. This lady that
It's also
says "Attenzione, borseggiatrice." I don't know if you've seen it on TikTok. It
yeah.
has become like a bit of a viral thing, and it's because yeah, that's the main thing that you have to worry about in Milan. Just if you get to the public transportation, if you get to the subway and it's a bit busy, just be mindful of your own belongings and stuff like that. But apart from that, I mean, there are some people that say that around Centrale, it's mostly maybe you are going to find some homeless guy that is just looking for shelter. If you don't mind them, they are not going to bother you. It's just you mind your own business and nothing bad is going to happen. So yeah, I think it's a really safe city. I mean, in 2 years that I've been there, nothing has happened to me. It's just applying common sense at the end of the day. Just yeah, with that you're good to go.
Yeah, April, how was your experience while just
Yeah.
walking around and exploring?
Didn't have any concerns about safety. I think the crowds, kind of you stay as long as you're staying in a place that seems like it's relatively busy somewhat and trafficked. I didn't feel like any issue. Even when we got into some areas where we were the only two people walking around, I didn't really have any concerns for safety. And we stayed in the area that, yes, we saw maybe a couple of homeless individuals, but nothing that felt like they were intimidating or anything of that nature.
No precarious scenarios.
No.
Yeah. That's always nice. Because the I guess what the most common thing that I always hear about is, oh, you need to be careful of pickpockets. Like I was just in Paris and everybody always says, oh, you need to be careful about pickpockets. And I mean, there's some homeless people around, but I didn't really feel unsafe. I was kind of set the expectations where it's like, I need to be really vigilant. And I was with my mom and we went to Le Mans. And so we were wandering around Paris. And I mean, usually when I travel with somebody, I'm usually the one navigating. And so I just try to tell who, like either my wife or in this case, my mom, just try to, be aware, watch their surroundings and just kind of be a little vigilant while I'm navigating, because I'm probably going to be looking at my phone to make sure we're walking in the right direction,
Right.
and making sure we have our bags and just things like that, where it helps if you have a partner to try to use one person to navigate and the other one to kind of be little more
Yeah.
vigilant and stay aware of your
Heads up.
surroundings. Yeah,
So
exactly.
don't invite it, right? Like maybe don't wear
Right.
like this flashy watch that everyone knows is worth a lot of money. Like little things like that, just to not put it in anyone's face. I think that makes sense.
Exactly. And that just comes with experience of travel as well. You just kind of need to keep your head.
I think that's any big city, really.
Yeah.
What about I'm curious about the camping option, because I know this is something we've talked about before, but does anyone have any experience with that, or has anyone heard anything about that for this track?
I can give you a little update. The main campsite, which is essentially within the circuit, is closed this year for renovation. It's on it's kind of between the start finish line and the first chicane on the outside of the circuit, super close to the track, but there's a swimming pool there as well. But unfortunately, it is not operating this year. The other one worth mentioning, the company, the operator is Camping F1, which is a British company, and they were selling access to a campground this year, but unfortunately the whole company went bankrupt maybe 2 months ago, right before the Austrian Grand Prix. So unfortunately a lot of people kind of out of pocket and without a campground. I don't know much more. I believe there is a campsite up in the northeast corner of the circuit called Biasono Camping. And from what I'm aware, it's like basically run by some local guys that have access to a large field. And so it's not super high end, but they do have toilets and facilities and showers. And it is pretty close to the circuit, but I don't know of other camping options.
What about pricing?
Again, I'm not really sure on pricing, to be honest. But this is, I think it's probably fairly affordable because it's not the kind of campsite where you can go and there's a pre-erected tent or a glamping or anything like that. It's pretty much here's your pitch. We've got some toilets and bathrooms and showers and maybe a bar or a shop or something. But fairly old school, but probably fairly cheap and close walking distance to the track.
Cool. Before we move on to the seating, just want to ask one question from the audience. So Sebastian was asking about reaching Monza. Is it more convenient to depart from Porto Garibaldi with a Trenord combo, or to take that L1 Metro and Z221 bus option?
Okay.
Yeah, you go, Eduardo.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that I think there are three main options to get to the circuit, which is the first one is taking the M1, the red line up to Sesto San Giovanni, and then take the set 221 bus. I did that on Friday, I think, last year, and I also did that this year for the WEC race because there were obviously less options for transportation. It's something that I think is going to be very busy on Saturday and Sunday. So yeah, maybe if that is an option that is attractive for someone, I would maybe advise to do it on Friday. See how they feel, see how many people are doing that. And then because also on Sunday, the bus only passes every 40 minutes. So it's not a bus that runs that much even on Sunday. So yeah, it's maybe the option that I wouldn't suggest anybody to use unless it's the last option that they have. And also it's the cheapest one because with just one ticket, you can take the train and also the bus. But yeah, it's not going to be very convenient or very comfortable. The other option would be to either take the train from Centrale or Porta Garibaldi. I think Porta Garibaldi is a little bit less crowded. April was there, I think, so I don't know how crowded it was.
It was very crowded.
So even in Porta Garibaldi was crowded.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to touch on, the transportation and try to get an idea about the crowds where it's like, yeah, we're talking about specific trains and tickets and things like that, but what's boarding like? What's the experience of getting there
I
to
mean,
the station?
you can buy a ticket for specific times and that kind of went out the window. So it was just whatever car you can get in and train that's departing that you can get on. That seemed to be the experience. I will say, it was mentioned before too, if you're going to take the line that's out of Porto Garibaldi, it may depend on where you're sitting. For me, it worked because we were in Grandstand 12, which is in the Ascari. So with that, we were needing to enter from that side anyway. If you're sitting in some of the other side of the track, it might not be the best option for you unless you have planned for a lot of walking and gridlock of just foot traffic as well. And I've made that mistakes.
Some other things worth mentioning, just quickly on the bus, the Z221 bus. I definitely take your point, Eduardo, that probably on the weekend on race day, it's not a good option, not enough buses. But on Friday, the thing about that bus is you can get really close to a lot of the entrances to the circuit. So whereas when you take the train to the Monza station, followed by the shuttle bus, the black shuttle, even when you take the shuttle, you're still kind of a long walk from a lot of the gates. So less walking involved with that one. But the Trenord combo, I think it's €10 a day. And to be clear, that includes the train ticket and the shuttle bus from the Monza station, which essentially goes through the southern part of the Monza Park to the gates, or close to the gates at the southern part of the circuit. So it's good for Parabolica, it's good for the main straight, not so bad for the first chicane as well.
And then Friday, we had heard last year about a potential impending rail strike for Friday. So we had a rental car that we were intending to return on Thursday and take the trains the rest of the weekend, but decided to keep the rental car for Friday. Driving in and out on Friday was very easy because the crowds were much lighter. Definitely from what we saw for Saturday and Sunday, I don't think I'd recommend driving.
I think the other thing that's worth mentioning is just like how you think about the travel overall. Like even for Canada, right? Like if you either had to go before you knew the crowd was going to get there, or you had to be willing to wait a bit, because it's just, no matter what you do, there's so many people going through that you just have to plan around all of that, I think. And so like any of these options could work if you're planning ahead.
Sure. And one other thing to note, I'd say for Sunday, I would definitely consider taking the express train to Biassono. I mean, let's not forget, Monza is in the middle of Monza Park, which is one of the largest city parks in Europe. So it's not like you're going to be walking along the side of a, expressway or something. You're going to be, even if you have to walk 30 minutes or 45 minutes, you're going to be walking through a beautiful park. Normally the weather's good as well. So, be ready to walk, but be also ready that it's a nice walk. It's pretty flat. There's nice paths, infrastructure in the park. So, whichever way, there is going to be some walking, but don't be afraid of walking, because it's a really nice place to walk.
Are there some vendors and things like that in the park on that walk that can kind of break it up a bit?
There are dotted around, especially on race weekend.
beer.
There's food trucks and drink stalls and things like that.
Stuff like that makes a 40-minute walk seem like not too big of a deal.
Yeah, exactly.
Plus all the fans.
Greg, before we move on real quick, I wanted to try to touch on the shuttles a bit because it looks like there's the black shuttle, and then there's, I think, two other options that go from Monza station to the circuit. Eduardo, do you know about those?
I know about a blue shuttle, but that only goes from some of the outer car parks, the blue car parks. Okay. I think there used to be another, like a purple shuttle, but that was also for car parks. Okay. So in terms of shuttle buses, it's like from Monza station to closer to the circuit is the black shuttle.
Okay. Yeah, and I also think that ticket, it's really good value. I mean, because you take the train from, I'm not sure, but I think that you can take it either from Garibaldi or from Centrale, get off in Monza, and then take the black shuttle that takes you to the circuit. So yeah, I mean, either that option or the option to the train station Biassono Lesmo, which is in the north. Both of those options are, I think, good options to get to the circuit.
And what's the experience like on the shuttles? Is it something that's going to be everybody's walking on right away? Or are you going to wait in a line when you get off, when you approach it? And what's the situation on them?
Yeah, last year I didn't take the shuttle, but I wish I had. There is a line. I mean, I remember that when I got off in Monza, because what I did on Saturday was I actually walked all the way from the Monza station to the circuit. But yeah, there was a line because obviously the amount of people that is going is just very much. It's a large amount of people. But yeah, I mean, if you don't feel like walking, it's going to save you a long time. But I mean, like you say, if you like walking and if you want to just spend some time in the park, it's a nice walk. And also the atmosphere in the town of Monza, it's really you can already start to feel like the party and the tifosi experience when you get off in the Monza station. So that is the nice part about this.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. All right, cool. So let's talk about the ticket options. Grandstands are probably the better option compared to general admission. General admission, or prato as they call it, is cheap, but being a flat circuit, the views are pretty limited, and so you really need to get there early and get a good spot up at the front, and hopefully nobody towers over you with a makeshift uh, scaffold that they like to build in Monza. But grandstands are kind of located heavily around the main grandstand area. I guess I say main grandstand area, but I'm talking about the front and back of the paddock. The way the circuit is organized, yeah, you can see on the image below. Most of the grandstands are kind of on this section of the circuit, and so general admission is kind of. I'm not too sure on where the general admission is more heavily located, since most of it is grandstands.
One thing I can say, and it's all about the popularity of F1, especially since the pandemic, is that a lot of new grandstands have been added at Monza and lots of other circuits as well, and that eats into the available general admission areas. So when I first went to the circuit, it was 2014, like some of the best general admission viewing for me was on the inside of Parabolica. And now if you look, there's GF 10, 11, 12, 13, they're new grandstands. And I think even general admission fans were completely restricted from even entering that area last year, which, was obviously frustrating for a lot of people. The main kind of general admission area is at the top corner of the circuit, the Lesmo corners now. And then it's just where you can find a gap or, between the grandstands, that kind of thing. But that area inside Parabolica is kind of, off limits now, I think, to general admission, which is pretty disappointing.
And just on that in general, can you walk around, like how easy is it to walk around the circuit both with a GA ticket as well as with a grandstand ticket? Or are you basically stuck in your specific section?
I mean, you can walk around pretty much everywhere. Like, come back to the point, it's the city park and there are paths. If you look at the kind of, it looks like the western part of the circuit here, but it's actually the northern part of the circuit. But inside the circuit, there's paths leading, different directions. So you can walk through the park, to see different corners and different areas. I actually remember the second chicane where you can see grandstands 9 and 10. I remember that being a good spot to watch, between the grandstands, essentially.
I did have a really difficult time walking around. We came in through Gate C, which brings you in near 8A and 8B. And we were sitting in 12 and we could not get over there just because of the way that the foot traffic and unfortunately vehicle traffic, we were sharing the same path and it was just gridlock. We could not.
Because you would have had to take a tunnel under the circuit, correct?
Correct. And it was just, we were at a standstill for nearly 45 minutes. So we figured we're not getting anywhere. So we turned around and we exited and we went up back in through Gate D to get to our seats. So don't make that mistake. I would say that was probably the biggest lesson learned that we had, is to really do go for the gate that is closest to your seat if that's where you're trying to get to. Once we were there at 12, though, it was no problem for us to get around to the paddock area. That was very easy to walk around and get through that area.
Eduardo, where have you sat for this race?
I was sitting on what in this map is the 23A. So at the end of the Parabolica. I mean, it was nice because we had a screen not so far. We could see all the cars going inside of the pits. So yeah, it was I think a good seat. But yeah, like you were mentioning, all the area of the inside of the Parabolica, at least last year, was closed for general admission because you had to take
Like a bridge?
a bridge. Sorry, a bridge that take you from around 21E to the inside of the Parabolica. So they checked your ticket in that bridge, so you couldn't access the area of the inside of the Parabolica unless you had a ticket for that area. But I would say that in the rest of the circuit, except the what is below in here, the southern part, it's not that hard to move around. What I did also last year is I went to the circuit from the Lesmo entrance just to go all around the circuit, just to get to know the circuit. So I walked from the Lesmo to the Variante Ascari and then to my seat in the inside of the Parabolica. And yeah, it was crowded, but I didn't have the experience that April had, fortunately, of just staying there still for 45 minutes until somebody moved. I think that once you get inside of the circuit, but really like inside of the circuit, it's way easier to move around. There are also some shops. I mean, if you see the Garden Lounge and the Race Club, there are some shops in that area that are accessible for everyone. They are all the year they are there. So that's a nice place that you can go and you can visit if you want to kind of like get to know a bit more about the circuit.
And something else I'd mention, some of the grandstand options. If you look opposite the pits, near the start-finish straight, you can see the grandstands 26A, B, and C. But in front of those are some really affordable grandstands. So they're literally, I don't know, the first 10 rows right next to the catch fencing, but they're much, much cheaper than the grandstands behind. And you are literally in the heart of the action, right opposite the grid. In terms of like the more expensive grandstands, I think a lot of people prefer the first chicane, 6A, B, and C on the inside, C being closest to the chicane and more expensive. And on the outside, 8A and 8B are also pretty good grandstands. As well on the Parabolica, 22, which is the one closest to Parabolica, is a permanent covered grandstand. And then 21A is the next best after that, and then 21E is the cheapest and furthest from the corner, so not as good. I've not really spent a lot of time at Ascari, but maybe April, you can comment about the views there.
I think we worked with what we had. Looking back, I do think we would have tried for something different, but it was actually the true experience we had. We originally had general admission tickets, and then after doing some research, decided that was probably not what we wanted to stick with. So we upgraded to grandstand, and that was only about 8 weeks out prior to the race. So there wasn't a ton available out there, even in the aftermarket space. So we ended up in 12, but the view was okay. Definitely a lot of even just general admission folks. You can see there's a general admission area right next to it. It is really, really hard to see in that area. Luckily, we were high enough up. Our row was high enough up where we could still get a good vantage point to see as they were coming down that straight.
So I guess there's only a handful of covered grandstands here, right, Andy?
Yes. Well, for sure, 22 on Parabolica. Most of the grandstands on the first part of the start-finish straight, so 24, 26, A, B, and C, number 1, which is Centrale, the main grandstand. They're all covered. Nothing on the first chicane is covered. Nothing on the second chicane is covered. Some of the smaller grandstands on Ascari are covered, but I'm not sure which ones. So yeah, the majority are not covered.
So, yeah, that's kind of what was what I was thinking, just from the images and videos I've seen of the circuit over the years. Where's the podium situated? Is it across from like 29D?
And no, it's kind of closer to 30A, near
Okay.
those two TV screens there.
Yeah.
And
the
obviously
track
it's a
invasion.
different podium to normal in that it's a platform that goes out over the straight itself.
Yeah, and the track invasion. Eduardo, did you take part in that last year or April?
Yeah, I did. I was.
I
was right there. So
so we were pretty far from where we would have had the ability to get there and actually take part of the action. So we headed in the opposite direction. If you remember, last year is when Ricardo did not finish, and we actually got to walk right underneath his car that a cherry picker had picked up. So that was kind of fun to see that instead of getting on the track.
yeah. I would say if you are not in one of the stands that is closer to the main straight, you need to get going some time before the race ends. I mean, several laps
Absolutely.
before the race ends. Yeah, otherwise you're just not going to make it on time for the podium.
Did they open the track near your grandstand on the inside?
Yes, they did. They opened, but they took a while to open it in that area. So I went exactly to the middle of the Parabolica, and that's where they opened. Obviously, then you have to run all the way to the start finish point. But yeah, they did open somewhere around the 23B and also in the middle of the Parabolica. That's where they opened the gates, at least where I was. But I know that they also open around the main grandstand along the.
That's correct.
the
Number one.
Yeah.
Between 1 and 2, and I think also between 25 and 30A, somewhere around there.
Yeah. At least for WEC, they did open in those two points, so you could access. And also, it's important that the podium is pointing to the straight. So if you get from the Parabolica, you have to move to the other side because otherwise you don't see any of the podium. So yeah, just a tip for everyone who is trying to get to the podium, which is a really nice experience. I mean, if you have a general admission ticket and you haven't seen that much of the race during the 2 hours, I would say just go for the track invasion because it's a really nice experience. You get like this immense Ferrari flag that Tifosi always carry there. So yeah, I think it's one of the best parts of the Monza experience. It's going to the circuit and looking at the podium. I don't know if Ferrari is going to be able to do something worthy this year. Maybe, but yeah, I mean, anyways, the Tifosi are always putting there the atmosphere.
Cool. So let's start talking about the experience a bit, trackside, and what are lines like getting inside the circuit, and how bad is security as far as I know they're taking bottle caps away on water bottles and things like that. What's the entrance like?
The queues were long, but it seemed to, in terms of security, it seemed to loosen as the weekend went on. Last year, it looks like it changed this year, but last year bringing in a refillable flask was prohibited. I saw that was on the allowed list this year, so that's great. But I had one in my bag on Sunday last year, and they didn't take it. Did take a bottle cap on Friday. So we learned the lesson, put the bottle cap in your pocket when you walk in, and that was fine. No issue. We literally, right on the other side of the gate, took it out, put it back on, and nobody stopped us. It seemed kind of arbitrary that they were taking them. The queues were long for everything. So I think that's just one thing to be prepared for.
And is it also true last year that they were doing a second security or ticket check, like outside each grandstand every time he came in and out?
Yes, that is, at least in our grandstand. I think we were reading about a couple of horror stories in one grandstand in particular where that was not happening, and it was a little chaotic with some folks taking seats that were not theirs. But in our grandstand, at least, we were having to check in and out every time you went in and out.
Like, did they physically scan your ticket, or they just look at it?
They scanned ours.
And Eduardo, is that the same thing that you experienced over at 23?
They tried, but honestly, the amount of people that was getting in and the amount of people that they had scanning ticket, it just wasn't enough people. So I think on Saturday morning they were scanning all tickets, but then Saturday afternoon and Sunday they were just visually checking your ticket, and if you had the right ticket, you could go in. Seating was also a bit more complicated, at least inside of the Parabolica, because the seats were just like two lines that were painted in there, and they had like a sticker. But as the weekend went on, the stickers started to fly away, so you didn't knew which was the number of the seat. So yeah, I mean, another advice is locate your seat early in the morning, so you don't have that experience of your ticket of your sticker just flying away. But yeah, they do check the part about the correct grandstand that you are in. And also in the entrance, because I think that that was something that a lot of people were asking, was about the power banks. Last year they weren't allowed, and I think that for this year they have this weird prohibition about certain weight for the power banks. I'm not sure how they are going to try to enforce that. I just know that last year I got in with a power bank, no issues. Again, it's just, I mean, it's yeah, I don't know why they prohibit the power banks, but I think that for this year I read that they were also on the allowed list, but up to a certain weight.
300 grams.
Yeah. It's,
get it.
yeah.
Every security gate is going to have a T scale. That's crazy. I
Just
don't
bring a
understand.
10-pound dumbbell and figure out more or less.
You need to ask for the calibration certificate on that scale.
I mean, that's almost an essential, or it is an essential, right? Because your cell service is bad, your phone dies pretty quickly.
Yeah, I just stayed on airplane mode the whole time to not drain my battery so I could still take photos, but that was really all I needed. We grabbed a screenshot of the circuit map and the calendar of events to know what time everything started, and then just left it at that.
Yeah. One other piece of advice for that was someone had said this and it worked well, was you can change what frequency your phone connects to. So a lot of people's phones now connect to the 5G network, but you could choose to go to a 4G or 3. And because people are not on that band, you actually can get better connection. So that's also worth thinking about.
That's something that I've done. It typically works. That and just repinging yourself. I have an iPhone and it lets you select 5G auto, 5G off, LTE. And sometimes I just toggle each one and just toggle airplane mode and just not necessarily being patient, but I just cycle it on and off. And eventually I can usually get some kind of service, actually enough for timing. And once it works, do not mess with your phone and try to stay in the app. And then you can, I can usually get timing to work that way whenever I'm at these events. But to reiterate on the circuit or the seat numbering, I was at Red Bull Ring in Austria, the last race, and there's no row numbers in my section. And so I just asked whenever I got there on Friday and figured out my row and then just stuck to that row, assuming that was row 21 or whatever. And nobody ever came to get in my seat. And so I guess I was right. But yeah, you just kind of, it helps to get there kind of early and make sure that you find your seat and hang out for a while and meet your seat neighbors, because that also helps, because people know that you're in your seat and try, somebody, they won't let somebody come in and take your seat, because that does happen in some of these events where they think that the seat's open. And so if you're in line for beer or food and then you're trying to get back to your section right before the action starts and you get there and somebody's in your seat, it's already hard to get there because of crowds and everything. And so it helps to try to get there early and make sure that people know you're there, because I feel like just having that presence alone can help have a better experience.
There's one other important question I wanted to ask April and Eduardo, and it's about the token system for buying food and drinks last year. I heard it was a shambles.
That was going to be my question: is does anybody know if they're repeating that this year? Because I think
you would
that
hope
was the
they've
worst
learned
part.
something, but we will see. Probably not.
You would,
So it was that was really the worst part. So you have to wait in an awful line, an awful queue to get tokens. They were running out. Then use those tokens and stand in very long lines with a very large amount of tokens in your hand that get heavy after the course of a very long and hot day. And it got to the point where they were running out of them. So there were not stewards, but volunteers, workers that were running from the vendors as people were paying with tokens to run back over to the place where you buy tokens to recycle them through. I'm really surprised that they didn't give up on it at some point. I did hear they gave up on the prepaid bracelets because the terminals had gone down. Luckily, we didn't get those last year. I did leave the circuit with I think about 30 tokens left over because the queues were just too long and they were not worth it. So I think I need to send those to somebody.
Maybe they're collectible.
Yeah, I did not get a Monza 100 one, unfortunately. They're just the standard.
Eduardo, what was your experience with that?
Yeah, for me, it was funny because the same coin system, it was the same coins they used last year for the Monza GP, the 6 hours, and the Imola GP. So those coins were used for every event in Italy, and they were a disaster in all of them. So I read that for this year, they were ditching the coin system, and they were trying to do something different. They were going to try to do it in Imola, but we know what happened with Imola. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. And what I read is that they were going to try to test in the WEC in the 6 hours. In the 6 hours, what they did is you went to each vendor, you bought your whatever it is that you wanted, and they gave you a ticket. And then with that ticket, which I think it's a more logical option. So they did that in WEC. Their lines weren't as bad as they were in Formula One, but obviously the crowd was way, way, way smaller. So we'll see if it changes. If they keep the coin system, please, anybody who is listening, who is going, buy all the coins that you need as soon as you get to the circuit, because otherwise it's a nightmare to just stand there. Also, the weather last year was super hot, so yeah, not a good time making a line in the heat. So if they don't ditch the coin system, yeah, just buy all the coins that you need at once and then
Agreed.
Just spend them.
Or as you're leaving the circuit Saturday, get what you need for Sunday, because the queue would be pretty died down by the end of Saturday. That's what we wished we had done. We wished we brought our own food in. We just didn't make the time to purchase food ahead of time to pack it and bring it. But I would recommend that as well. The food vendors are good, but it just to wait in those queues was brutal in the hot sun. And with water, there was only 4 water refill stations across the entire circuit. So bring as much as they allow you to bring, and then try to sneak in more, because that's not worth waiting for.
Yeah, so I was going to say, this circuit does allow you to bring in your own food. And so that's where I usually like to travel with like just some Ziploc bags, and I swing by a grocery store or market the night before I go to the track, and I'll just buy some fruit and meat and some cheese, some nuts, things like that, and portion it out into Ziploc bags and just put them in the fridge wherever I'm staying, so that in the morning you just grab it and it's in your bag ready to go. Just that way you're not like, I need to eat something right now, I'm starving, but this line is going to be an hour long until I can get anything. Monza, you might have to wait in 2 lines because you got to get tokens.
Yeah, you have the coins. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's one of the good things. But the circuit doesn't allow you to take in alcohol or anything in glass. So just take things. I think they allow plastic bottles less than 1 liter, and so
Yeah.
I would definitely plan on taking some food. You could probably just pack a sandwich and some chips or something that would be pretty substantial to help get you through the day when you don't want to hop in lines.
I've also got one tip for anyone in the first variant, the first chicane grandstands, especially 8A or B. If you walk about 5 minutes behind there on the outside of the circuit is a place called Hostel Costa Alta, which is a nice old building with some grounds, and they have a bar and they have food. And it probably means you have to scan out of the circuit and scan back in, but it's like a bit of a refuge for me whenever I went there in the past. Even I went there in May this year. Unfortunately, it's not somewhere where you can stay because it's booked out by, I think, the emergency workers from the circuit. But as a place for a pit stop between sessions or at the end of the day, you know, to let the crowds die down, I really recommend this place called Costa Alta. It's only a 5-minute walk from 8A and 8B.
So let's talk about leaving the circuit. What's it like leaving on Friday and Saturday compared to Sunday? Eduardo?
Yeah, a whole experience, definitely. I mean, living on Friday, it's no issue. I mean, living on Friday, it's not that big of a crowd, so you won't have any issues. Actually, I think on Friday I also took the set 221 bus, and there it wasn't even full. So yeah, definitely Friday is the easiest day. Saturday and Sunday become a bit more complicated. I would say the same thing as when getting to the circuit. You have the options of the black shuttle that takes you to the Monza station and then take you the train for them. Or if you are sitting somewhere close to the Lesmo corners, you can also take the Via Sono Lesmo train station that takes you all the way back to Milan. I think that if you are in that in this map, the north part of the circuit, I would say Via Sono Lesmo train station is the best option because you don't walk that much. It's literally right outside the circuit. Because leaving the circuit, especially if you live right at the end of the race, is going to be it's messy. I mean, it's just 100 and something thousand people that want to go back at the same time. So I would say it's better to just watch. Either you leave as soon as it finishes and you don't see anything of the celebration. If you have something, I think there was someone in Reddit that wanted to go to San Siro to a football match. So for them, absolutely leave as soon as the race ends or even before. But if you're not doing that and if you want to just hang around on the circuit, it's good to stay for 1.5 hours. Just let things to come down a bit, and then you can go out, and it's going to be way easier to catch a train to go back to Milan.
What about just to kind of close out this section? What about things you did in the area or in the city, like local attractions that are worth hitting? Or Eduardo, where you hang out every day? One of the two.
Yeah, I mean, Milan has, it's a really nice city, I think. As far as Italian standard goes, it's not the best place, like, for example, for food. It's not as historic as some other Italian cities, like Rome or stuff. But most of the things that you can do in Milan are in downtown. Here in the pictures in the lower left, you have the Duomo. And right on the left, there is the Galleria Vittorio Emanuele, which is a shopping mall, basically. So yeah, the downtown is really nice if you just want to go shopping, to see some nice history about. Also, really close to there, like 20 minutes, 15 minutes walking, you can get to the Last Supper, which it's I think, I mean, even if you are not a religious person, it's something that it's historically very important thing. Yeah, it's really nice to go there and to see. Tickets do sell out a long time before. So again, even for the Last Supper, you might have to go to a resale site, but it's something really nice that you can do. And yeah, even if you don't want to stay in Milan, because Milan also, I think that 1 or 2 days to go around Milan is more than enough. It's not that big of a city. There are not that many attractions, but you can do a lot of day journeys starting from Milan. You can go either to Lake Como, which is really, really nice, especially with the heat of the summer. It's a lake. You can go there and spend the day. Or Italy has a really good train network. So if you want to go, for example, here in the picture, to Museo Ferrari, Ferrari has 2 museums, one in Modena and one in Maranello. But you only need to get to Modena because they sell you also the transportation to get you to Maranello. That is really nice. You can buy a train ticket and you are there like in 1.5, 2 hours, something like that. And even if you want to go further away, these fast trains can take you from Milan to Venice in 1.5, 2 hours, something like that. So it's a city that is super well connected, that you can move around. I mean, like I mentioned before, if you want to go to party, you go either to the south of the city, or you go also to Corso, Buenos Aires. It's also a nice ambient there. So yeah, I mean, shopping, partying, it's a nice city, I think, overall, just to spend a week even in there.
You can also head down to Misano or Rimini and go to the beach, go to Catalica. That whole area is just incredible. There's a lot of really good food, a lot of good places to go, and it's really well connected with either trains or if you have a rental car, you drive down there.
We had a car. We were staying on Lake Como, a little bit north of Como, though, the few days before coming back down to Milan for the race weekend. And then we also, on the way, we did have a car. We were driving. We went to the Alfa Romeo Museum, which is just outside of Milan. So that's another stop you could make as well if you've Ferrari'd out.
Yeah, I've been to the Ferrari Museum in Maranello, and that's a really cool experience. There's a lot of the room that they have of the historic F1 cars with all the trophies. It's just like, I got all emotional. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, it was pretty awesome out there.
Yeah, and if you have a car and you want to drive, also all the area around Bologna is it's full of car history. You can also go to the Lamborghini Museum, to the Pagani Museum, Ducati Museum. So it's full of things to do if you are a car fan. It's full of things to do, and that is easier, especially those smaller museums, if you have a car. If you don't have a car, it's a bit harder. But yeah, it's still worth doing for sure.
Motor Valley is what they call it.
Exactly.
It even has its own touristic website, motorvalley.it, I believe.
Yeah. I think you need to rent a supercar and go to all the museums. And
That sounds like a plan.
I rented a Fiat, or I guess it's an Abarth 596. It was some special edition. That thing was awesome. I turned it on, it just like grumbled. And it's little. It was a four-cylinder turbo, and I was keeping up with a Porsche on the tollway, going way faster than it should have gone.
Yeah, because
a little better than the 500L rented, but
yeah, it was a fun little car, and I drove that from Milan to Misano for MotoGP. And on the way back, I ended up getting a parking ticket I got it like 9 months after the fact. It turns out I went down a lane I was not supposed to at the airport. And so you just need to be careful if you do drive in Italy to make sure you pay attention to signs and stick to where you're allowed to go, because or else you might get a ticket 9 months later, and it just makes no sense. It was only €20. I just paid it because I don't want to risk anything. Next time I go to Europe, being able to rent a car.
An enemy of the state.
Yeah, it just yeah. Well, it was weird because I got mail from the Vatican. I was like, what? And then it was a traffic violation. Yeah, I just logged on and paid it. No, whatever.
All right. So that's it. I think we've kind of covered pretty extensively all of Monza.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to move on quickly and cover Singapore. It's definitely a lot more organized and collective. So
yeah. And so today April and Eduardo were joining us just for Monza. And so I want to say thanks to these guys for joining and helping share some really good info. April, are you on the subreddit as well?
I am. So it's my name backwards. So it says USlurpa. It's April Sue backwards. And that's me. If you've seen me asking questions or answering questions, that's me.
What's your next race, April?
Well, we did Silverstone last month, and then we're heading to Abu Dhabi in November.
Nice.
Good choices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Eduardo?
Yeah, me too. I mean, if you've seen me around in Reddit, I am as Mapache Villa, which is my nickname. So yeah, if you see me there in Reddit, you can say me hi. I love to help people. So if you have any question, I will try my best also to answer to anyone who has any questions.
Will you be at Monza?
No, sadly no. This year I went to the 6 hours and also to the 24 hours of Le Mans. So I had only one race for Formula One, and I chose Imola, and then it didn't happen. So yeah, I chose wrong. So yeah, unfortunately there won't be Formula One for me this year. But I mean, anyways, the 24 hours was worth it, honestly.
Nice. Looks like I'm the only one going this year to Monza.
Yeah, I'll be at Zandvoort for a couple of weeks.
Given all of the messiness from last year, I would go back. It is absolutely worth it, as long as you're.
It's an amazing place. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank
we'll
you.
see you later.
Ciao, ciao. Thank you.
All right, so let's switch over to Singapore. Let's talk about that for a bit. So Singapore's it's a fairly new circuit compared to Monza. I think it joined in 2008. Does that sound
Correct.
right, Andy?
Correct.
Yeah, so 2008 has a bit of history as well. with,
Infamous race.
Yeah, Crashgate. And if you're a bit into the history side of Formula One and you like the drama, because this is in the Bernie days before social media, or I guess it was kind of before social media too. But there was an incident with what was his name? I'm going blank on his name.
Nelson Piquet Jr.
Nelson Piquet Jr. Yeah, sorry. And between him and to help his teammate, who was Fernando Alonso, help get a better result. And it's pretty drama filled. There's a really good book written by Mark Priestley, who was a McLaren mechanic at the time, who wrote a really good book. He was I believe Lewis Hamilton's mechanic, and it has some pretty good insight from the paddock. It's really worth reading if you're into any kind of history or just some inside info on Formula One. But so Singapore is a street circuit. It's at night, right through. I mean, it looks like the middle of Singapore just from all the aerial views. It seems like it's a true.
It's pretty central.
Yeah, it is like the downtown.
Yeah, it's
It's
probably
called Marina Bay area of the city, but it's right there.
Yeah, and so it seems like it's one of the original destination circuits. It's kind of what started that kind of.
It's also
path.
the original night race, the first full-time night race in F1.
Yeah, and so nothing. The circuit is streets, but it's kind of purpose built on part of it, right along the.
I think if you visit Singapore any time of the year, the pit complex is there. It's a permanent structure. I think some of the hospitality that gets built on top of the pits is temporary, but the pits is there all year round. The rest is pretty much streets.
Yeah, because as you get close, you'll start to see the barricades going up, and you know that the whole city's getting ready, and it's all like a lot of it is main road.
Yeah, so I haven't actually been to I've been to Singapore at the airport. I spent like a 10-hour layover there, which I ended up getting a hotel inside the secure area of the airport. So I didn't have to leave security, which is really nice. That airport is incredible. And
doesn't count, Adam.
I know. That's why I was like, I saw some trees, but I didn't. I saw Singapore from the plane. I saw a bunch of the harbor. I saw the circuit. I saw the paddock, but I haven't been. And so it's definitely on my destinations. It's so far to get over there for me. And it's just the other side of the world, but it's really well connected. And if you have the time to get out there, I definitely recommend it because it seems like a real destination circuit. But so Singapore it's really well connected, like I said, and you can easily catch a flight from Europe or Asia or North America. It's just it can be very long depending where you're coming from. Also, Australia is probably the closest place that's a different continent. But most of the flights will connect unless you're coming from Europe.
I did, but it's not America, it's not Europe.
Okay, well, I can tell you that flight time from Perth, Western Australia, is I think only about 6 hours. Melbourne and Sydney is more like 8 to 9 hours, I think.
Yeah, I never realized how far it was because I went to Bangkok for a wedding and I flew from LA to Tokyo, spent a week there, and from Tokyo to Singapore, it was like a 6-hour flight. And then from there, we had a connection. It was another 2.5-hour flight to Bangkok. And so if you're traveling to get out there, I think the best, there's so many things that you can experience while in that part of the world. And it's definitely worth taking some time to have the Grand Prix kind of at either end of it, because with the flight options, you can kind of book something either before or after the Grand Prix and then go back to Singapore, then go back to wherever you're coming from.
And the city's so well connected that even if you're looking to save some money on the long haul flights, you could even fly into Kuala Lumpur, which is really close. I think it's only a 45-minute flight.
Yeah.
And you may end up, saving a lot more on the main flight to KL, and then buying $100 connecting flight from KL to Singapore, for example, or even taking the train.
That's what I was going to say. You can take a train, or I guess there's day trains, there's night trains, there's buses, there's things that it gives you an option to get to Kuala Lumpur and then explore that area, and then make your way down to Singapore for the Grand Prix. After spending a few days kind of hopping around, and I would definitely take advantage of being in that time zone and try to get acclimated to it.
Yeah, and you can see they have Petronas towers. So not only the Mercedes sponsor, but they're like the icon of KL. So
yeah. And one area that I flew to before the wedding that I went to in Bangkok, we flew down to Krabi, which was probably a lot closer to Singapore than Bangkok, but AirAsia flies in and out of there for pretty cheap. And also, I think Singapore Airlines has Scoot, which is another budget airline, which I think is owned by Singapore.
Yeah, and it has Silk Air, which is like some traffic here. Silk Air, which is like a regular alternative to Singapore Airlines, which is owned by the airline as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't know about
The
that.
regional equivalent of Singapore Airlines.
Yeah, so there's plenty of options to get out into the city. And then once you get to the airport, everything is pretty well connected. And you can get from the airport to what is the center of Singapore. I think by public transportation using MRT, it'll probably take about an hour, I think, is whenever I looked it up.
Even quicker, like 40 minutes probably.
Yeah, I guess it depends where you go. I just looked
and I mean, it depends. If you've been on a long flight, you want to take a taxi, it's also pretty affordable.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say the taxi drivers are really honest, because I think the second Singapore Grand Prix I went to, I managed to leave not one, but two mobile phones on the back seat of the taxi, and got them back within an hour.
How many beers did you have?
It just say it was a long flight.
Yeah, stuff like that happens.
The whole city is like that. I mean, it's just an incredibly safe and comfortable and kind place. Like, everyone is super nice. You really don't worry for a thing. And I was there for several months and loved every minute of it. I just think it's really easy to get around. And the cab, maybe 20, 30 minutes. And if you take a lot of these long haul flights, at least from the US, you get in really late at night. And so there's no traffic. It's also a country that monitors the number of cars on the road, or has like regulations around it. It's very expensive to own a car. So traffic is usually not that bad.
What's the language like?
Yeah, and English is like, will have no problem at all. There's multiple languages. I forget the official one, but
I believe there's three.
Hindi,
Chinese.
Yeah, I think, and then English.
Mandarin and English. Yeah. But pretty much everyone speaks English. The only issue you might have is, some like a stronger accent in English, but no, it's easy to get by in English for sure in Singapore.
Yeah, it's Malaysian. Malay is another one.
Malaysian, that's right.
But yeah, it's incredibly easy. Like, you will not. Everything's in English. It's very easy to navigate. Yeah.
So once I guess. What I had thought about trying to get to that race this year, so I did some planning for it a few months back, and I had looked at staying at a hotel just outside Chinatown, which everything seems to connect really well by the MRT to get to the circuit, to get around the city, and just explore everything in general. But I guess there's two distinct areas right next to the circuit, which are Chinatown and then Clark Quay. Is that how you say it?
Clark Quay.
Clark Quay. Okay. I had a feeling. So Clark Quay seems like the more going out at night party area. It seems like there's a lot of clubs, there's a lot of bars, there's just a lot more things to do late night. And
that's where I stayed the last two times. I went to the race near Clark Quay, and you can either take the MRT, the metro, to get to the circuit, or you can walk. And so my friend and I think most times we would take the metro to get there, so you don't get all hot and sweaty, arriving at the circuit. But at the end of the day, maybe because the concerts happen on the Padang stage, which is a big open area, which is in the direction of Clarke Quay. So it's, you kind of watch the concerts halfway walking home and then, walk the rest of the distance.
Yeah, so what's in Chinatown? Is it more kind of touristic or food driven? What's there to
It's
do?
more food driven. I think there is some nightlife. I've never really gone out, but quite close to Chinatown is another area called Boat Quay, which is kind of also, as the name suggests, on the river, but it's close to the circuit in Clarke Quay. And it's where all the skyscrapers are, all the large business towers. And essentially in front of those, next to the river, is like a series of old shop houses, so like old buildings. And that's where a lot of the nightlife is. A lot of restaurants, we're sitting next to the river, and clubs and bars and restaurants. So between Clarke Quay and Boat Quay, there's a lot of your kind of late night scene after the racing action and the concerts are finished is to go to one of those two areas.
Yeah, and then Sentosa is like the resort island. So it used to be a fort, I believe, way back in the day, but now you'll find a lot of beaches. There's these like I guess like a day club.
Theme parks as well. Warner Brothers.
Yeah. So theme parks. There's like day parks and things where you can sit by a pool and hang out with a beer. So a lot of different like outdoorsy activities. And
I would recommend Sentosa as a day trip if you're there for a few days either side of the race. But in terms of as a place to stay for race weekend, I would avoid Sentosa because it's a good distance from the city centre.
So what are the prices like for hotels? Or is it strictly hotels? Is there a BB option, or what have you experienced?
It's mainly hotels. I mean, I haven't personally. I'm trying to think. No, I've always stayed in hotels for the race when I've gone, and unfortunately, they're expensive. The good ones, it's hard to get rooms. And I'm trying to think how much I paid last year for a 4-star hotel near Clarke Quay. The room was pretty small. The hotel was quite nice. I had a swimming pool. But US dollars, it was probably somewhere around $300 to $400 a night, which is fairly pricey.
Yeah, it seems like Singapore seems to be more on the higher end of places to visit. So I think.
Yeah, I mean the city does have hostels. Does have kind of cheap 2-star hotels, which are pretty basic and not going to be right downtown, but will be close to MRT stations, which still works. And it's also got a concept of capsule hotels. So kind of essentially between a hostel and a hotel, in that you have a small space in a room, which is your own, a capsule.
It's your own little pod.
Yeah, exactly.
How about the racing experience? So there's a bunch of different options. We said GA wasn't a great option in Monza, but here we were talking about it before we started, that it's actually really interesting or a great option for Singapore, and one you actually recommended the most, Andy?
I would recommend the
Premier Walkabout?
The Premier Walkabout, exactly. I just forgot the name for one second. Because I don't know if you got the circuit map there, Greg? There you go. So Singapore is one of those circuits that has different zones. So if you have a grandstand in one particular zone, you may not be able to enter the other zones. But the zone that is key is the one in yellow, which is zone 1. To be honest, a lot of the best grandstands are located in this zone. And pretty much if you get a grandstand in zone 1, then you can go to the other zones anyway. Whereas a lot of the other grandstands are in zone 4, the green zone on the west. And pretty much all of those, if you buy a grandstand in that zone, you can't go to the other zones. So it's worth remembering when you're buying tickets. So the Premier Walkabout gives you access to all the zones, but the last 2 times I've been with the Premier Walkabout, I've not felt the need really to go outside of Zone 1, the yellow area, apart from to see a concert on the Padang stage in the green zone, Zone 4. Maybe I spent some time there in Zone 2 and 3, but you have to remember there's a lot more people in Zone 4 than the other zones, especially Zone 1. And when it comes to Walkabout, they do sell just a Zone 4 Walkabout. So that's a lot cheaper, but it only gets you access to Zone 4. So the thing about Zone 1 is most people in that zone will have a grandstand seat. So there's less people in Walkabout, and so more chance to get a good view of the action. I can't guarantee that it'll be the same this year because the circuit has added quite a few new grandstands, particularly in Zone 1, around the last corner especially, which is where some of the best views for the Walkabout holders were. We should also mention that I think, is it Zone
near the
2,
harbor?
which is, yeah, well, near the flyer there to the west of the Ferris wheel is where used to be the Bay grandstand. That was a really big, really affordable grandstand, but due to some renovation works on the foreshore this year, that grandstand has been removed, and the last few corners have actually been redesigned as a result. So it's kind of removed an affordable grandstand option. The trackside views from Bay Grandstand were not particularly great. The views of the skyline were awesome, but yeah, that will, the changes that have happened for 2023 will potentially change, that kind of the viewing options, but especially those new grandstands that have been added to the ticket offer.
Yeah, and so one of the good things about Zone 1 is that there's 2 distinct stages for the big acts.
2 main stages, yeah.
That perform on this race weekend. There's the Padang, which is where the evening concerts are held for the big headliners, but also the Wharf stage inside Zone 1, which you can only access with a Zone 1 ticket or a Premier Walkabout. And so that is where you see some of the same headliners, but they'll perform either during the day or an exclusive set in the evening. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So I think the 2 biggest headliners this year are Post Malone and Robbie Williams. So they will only play on Saturday night, Sunday night on the Padang stage. But below that, there's a whole series of other headliners. And what will often happen is they'll play an earlier slot, perhaps on Saturday on the Padang, on the main stage. And then on Sunday, before the race, they'll play another set on the Wharf stage. And my experience is the Wharf stage, much less people, much easier, especially if you like the band to get up close, easy to get a drink. Also, given the rainfall last year, the Wharf stage is sealed. It's a concrete floor, whereas the Padang is a big grassy area, and it turned to mud last year. It was pretty bad with all the rain.
So another thing about the Wharf stage is that's where the drivers are doing the fan zone appearance Friday and Saturday.
Correct.
And so you need a Zone 1 ticket to access the driver talks at this race.
Yeah. And if you want to meet drivers as well, your best chance would be as well to have Zone 1 access, because quite close to the flyer near the last corner is the entrance to the paddock, and quite a few fans will hang out there, at the right times, the mid-afternoon when they're arriving or the late evening when they're leaving, and have a good chance of getting a selfie or an autograph at that paddock entrance.
Is it a walking path that they walk through, or is it a driving path?
It's a walking path because most drivers and teams will stay at one of the big hotels, which is essentially, walking distance. Again, quite close to the flyer, but inside the circuit. I'm trying to think of the names. The Ritz-Carlton is one of the hotels. Pan Pacific, I think, is another. But there's 4 or 5 of the big 4 or 5-star hotels, and they're like a 10-minute walk from the paddock. 5-10-minute walk from the paddock.
And so, this being a street circuit, your grandstand views are kind of, it's not like Spa or Circuit Americas where you get some elevation, you can see far out, you can see other corners. But these grandstands, you're kind of limited to your immediate view. You're not really going to see much else just because everything's kind of flat and surrounded by buildings. And so,
yeah. And in my opinion, like turn 1, turn 2 are the best grandstands at Singapore.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty easy decision if you can shell out the money for those tickets. It seems awesome.
And then for the experiences side of it, it felt like you're basically paying up for a bit more hospitality, air conditioning, which is important, obviously, in that part of the world. But that's what you're basically buying into.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been lucky enough to experience the Paddock Club or any hospitality at all, in fact, in Singapore. Either working or as a patron, but from what I know and from what I've read and heard about the experience, the Paddock Club especially, I mean, it's more expensive than a lot of paddock clubs, probably not as expensive as the stateside races this year, but it is an incredible experience. They bring in, top Michelin star chefs, to do special themed cuisine and pop up different activations in the Paddock Club, and it's a really incredible space. And the same goes for some of the other hospitality spaces offered by the circuit. They are expensive, but the experience is pretty outstanding.
Yeah, it just seems like a much more elevated experience where it just a little bit. Like Greg said, the air conditioning is probably a pretty big factor in that because I'm sure it's just hot and humid.
It is. There's a reason why it's at night and not during the day.
Yeah. So let's talk about so the races at night. What are we doing here today? What's there to do in Singapore, or is it easy to do things during the day?
I've personally always kind of flown in quite late, even Friday afternoon. So I've been to Singapore lots of other times as a tourist, but a lot of the F1 community, people working and teams and drivers and everything will sleep in and actually stay on European time. So they may not even get out of bed till midday because the nights will often end at 2 a.m. And I'm not talking about partying; I'm talking about working. Because of the track action being late in the evening. But always loads of things to do in Singapore. We talked about Sentosa Island. It's definitely good for a day trip. Singapore's a massive shopping destination, Orchard Road. Also, lots of cultural activities. There's a Chinatown we talked about, Little India, with the Indian population of the city lives. Gardens by the Bay, I can see the picture above there as like a botanic garden. And just food. Eating and drinking is incredible foodies paradise, the city.
That's mostly why I want to go there. You just eat everything.
Yeah. There's the hawker markets, which are basically like in the States, you think of like a mall food court, except outdoors usually, and the food is incredibly good, and it's not like a chain. It's usually like a mom and pop style restaurant with like very cheap but really high quality food, and it's almost like a communal table because you have people from all over just hanging out at 1 a.m, 2 a.m, even, who are just sitting and grabbing food or beer. So highly recommend that. So
it's exactly like the movie Crazy Rich Asians.
It's exactly like what?
The movie Crazy Rich Asians.
Oh, yeah. based in truth, right?
Yeah, I love that movie.
The bar on the right here is this bar, Atlas, which is one of the top rated bars in the world. But I just having been there, loved it. Like the decor, the ambiance of it was pretty incredible. There is a dress code, apparently. I didn't know it. Like you have to wear pants or like you can't wear shorts, but it's really worth it. It was a really great and just like cool, kind of like Great Gatsby vibe bar.
What did you drink while there?
It was so long ago, I don't remember. It's
Yeah.
2018. Yeah, it was a while. And it was after work one night. So yeah, it was pretty late.
I love a quarter mile at a time too.
Yeah.
And of course, Singapore, the Grand Prix is one of the big nightlife party races of the year, where you have high-end parties like the Amber Lounge parties, but also top DJs performing at clubs throughout the city. The city's also got some of the most incredible rooftop bars of any city in the world. Greg, you probably remember some of those.
Yes, I forget the name of it, but it was
Marina
right
Bay
on the top of the
Sands.
skyscraper. Yeah.
Marina Bay Sands.
Marina Bay Sands. There's C'est La Vie is
The
main club there, but I've also been to one. I can't remember what it was called. Altitude,
yeah.
something or other. And I think that I'm not sure if it survived COVID, but maybe it's open again. Hopefully, it's the highest rooftop bar in the world. It's on the top of one of the tallest skyscrapers in the city. It's incredible.
Yeah, it looks like it's closed, but that was really awesome. The Marina Bay Sands is definitely very, very touristy, and if you want to try and swim in that pool, you can't unless you're staying at the hotel. And I think on a normal night the room rates are $1,000 a night, so it's already going to be steep, let alone on a Grand Prix weekend. So just be mindful of that. But you could go up to dinner, or you can go to C'est La Vie, and so it's still worth checking out. But you're not going to be swimming in that infinity pool, which is always like the Instagram photo.
Yeah, it seems like going up there. I just want to go up there and have a cold beer or something, just to enjoy the view and check it out, and just
it's worth seeing.
Just experience it. Which I guess one of those bars you can pay just to get up there, and what you pay goes towards your drink. Does that sound right? I can't remember which bar that is.
That's correct. I don't know if it's still the case, but a few years ago when we went there, I went there with my family, and there was the option of going to the observation deck and paying $20 per person just to go on the deck, or paying the same amount but getting it in consumables for C'est La Vie. So we did the second option and had a drink and had some food and enjoyed the same view, but had a drink as well and something to eat.
Might as well, if you're spending the money, might as well get something more out of it.
Yeah, it's very comfortable. And I think the other thing that's worth touching on, you mentioned it at the beginning, but the proximity to other places. And so you are 4 hours from Bali by plane. You're an hour and a half from Malaysia or less, whether you're going to the east side or to where Kuala Lumpur is. The orangutans was from Kuching, and that was a scoot flight away, super easy. Thailand, you can get to Adam where you were, or you can go even to Koh Samui, which is a nicer island in the southeast, and I think it was 45 minutes. And then even Vietnam, you do need at least we needed a visa, but if you plan ahead, you could do that and then go through that country as well. And that was an hour and a half flight on another budget airline. So super, super accessible for any other part of the world. It's worth making that a starting point. And this year I'm going to be going and doing Japan after. So Andy, I'll see you there for that. But those are both a week apart. So it's actually a really nice trip, and you can kind of come back to the States by going back through Japan and make it worth the long flight.
Yeah, so booking with Singapore Airlines, I was able to do a week stopover in Japan on the way to Thailand, and the flight ticket didn't change in price by doing a stopover coordinated with Singapore Airlines, and so that worked out really well. So I was able to tag a week before I went to Thailand for a week, and it makes it pretty easy. And I could have done the same thing, but instead of a week in Japan, I could have done a week in Singapore, and the price wouldn't have affected anything. But yeah, I definitely recommend Ao Nang Beach in Krabi. It's an incredible part of Thailand. Just all the beaches in the Southeast Asia.
I've been there too. I love it.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, it's such a cool place to go to, and that's one of the places I really want to go back to. It's just so far. Cool. All right, guys. I think we're going to round this thing out. We've been going for a little while.
It's getting late here.
It's a lot of good info, though. I feel like some people will hopefully get some pretty good use out of this.
Yeah. And if anyone's going, we're going to be doing meetups in Singapore. We'll do it in Japan. We won't be doing it in Monza. but pay attention to the community because people have been organizing sort of grassroots ones. And so there might be there's definitely going to be a group of people who are going. So it's worth staying tuned to that for.
Yeah, and so there's some stuff on the subreddit on our Grand Prix Travel. We've got some stuff coordinated through FanAmp. We've got our group chats going. Join those group chats and just share info. They get pretty active during race weekends, and we've also got some alt chat, just some really good bases to touch on or to join in FanAmp. Greg, I don't know if you want to mention any of the other bases you've got started in FanAmp.
Yeah, so we've had Fan Behavior runs a podcast, the fantasy formula for people who are focused on like F1 fantasy. Grand Prix Travel obviously has been great for going to all the races. So we've had a lot more and more popping up, and it's great to just see the community continuing to grow. And so whether you're a fan of the sport in any capacity, it's worth checking out. And then obviously Andy with the guides, being able to access all of that for like any of the races we've talked about or anything else on the calendar. It's an awesome sort of ecosystem. So if you have any questions at all, I think the best thing to do is just to come in and get involved because people are incredibly friendly, and it's just made the experience, even when I've been going to races for the first time for myself this year, it's made it just a much more easy and fun and like connected experience.
And if you're ever just looking to get some general info, check out Andy's website, f1destinations.com. Andy, do you want to give a quick summary on some stuff?
Well, we've been doing travel guides for every Formula One race for the last 10 years. Always looking to add the most up-to-date, correct info and new info. And yeah, just keep it all up to date and useful and relevant for fans to go to races.
Yeah, there's some incredible detailed info on there. And also just join the Grand Prix Travel subreddit and join the community. I mean, even if you just lurk, there's a lot of people who are willing to contribute and help and just share some info. And also, I've got some stickers. If anybody's interested, just shoot me a message and I can send some your way. I'd ask you just pay for shipping or something, just $1 or $2, but I can get some out to you guys and just throw them up at some circuits around. I put some up in random places, and I've gotten pictures from people who send me them or send me pictures of my sticker. And it's pretty funny to see that I've put them up in some different places over Europe and here in North America. But yeah, if you want to kind of be a little bit more part of a community and spread some info, just the Grand Prix Travel logo, but feel free to reach out and I'll send some your way. But yeah, so we have a meetup happening at Zandvoort. If you've made it this far, we'll be at Zandvoort. I believe all three of us will be there. It's going to be at Club Nautique. Going to be after qualifying, but it's on the walking path between Zandvoort aan Zee, which is the train station, to the circuit. And so it's right in the middle of everything. We can wait out some traffic together and have a beer. There's going to be food available. We've got a reservation going. So expect us there. And if you guys are bored or just want to wait out some traffic and meet some people, some strangers from the internet, feel free to, come hang out and talk. Cool. All right, guys. Well, we'll see you at the next one.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Bye.